The mean girl sabotaged the Waitress'S family business. What the Mafia boss did next gifted her a new life. The bell above the door of Phoenix's family shop chimed, but it wasn't the welcoming sound of a regular customer. It was a shattering, aggressive clang, signaling the arrival of a predator. Ruth stepped into the struggling diner, her hot pink blazer and designer sunglasses screaming opulence in the worn, cozy space. Her entourage, 3 perfectly coiffed friends and 2 grinning young men, followed, filling the red vinyl booths with their careless laughter. Cassie, who had been meticulously polishing a coffee urn, felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. Ruth's presence wasn't an accident. It was a deployment. Their rivalry dated back to high school, not over a boy, but over a scholarship Cassie earned through merit, a prize Ruth, relying solely on her father's influence, believed was hers by right. That petty jealousy had metastasized into a deep-seated hatred. To Ruth, seeing Cassie working honestly was an insult, and the thought of her humble family keeping their shop was an affront to Ruth's own effortless superiority. She didn't want a cup of coffee. She wanted the destruction of Cassie's pride and the complete ruin of everything Cassie held dear. Ruth paused dramatically, surveying the foreclosed sign, still thinly veiled behind a poster, and smiled, a cruel, satisfied baring of teeth that promised absolute devastation. Ruth sauntered past Cassie, deliberately knocking a tray of clean silverware onto the worn linoleum floor, but Cassie's humiliation wasn't her primary goal today. She was aiming higher, for the complete eradication of Phoenix's family shop. Settling into the booth, Ruth didn't look at the menu. She looked at the walls, the ceiling, and the small, worn details that made the diner special. She pulled a slim, silver phone from her blazer and discreetly took a series of staged, critical photos of a chipped countertop and an innocent-looking storage closet door. This wasn't about a bad review. It was about fabrication. Moments later, she initiated a conference call, her voice dropping to a low, cold register that Cassie couldn't hear clearly, but the words she used, unreported pest control issue, safety hazard liability, and major health code violation, were chillingly clear to her associates. This was the execution of her plan, using doctored photos and her father's powerful legal connections to file a highly damaging, completely bogus report with the City Health and Safety Commission, timed perfectly to coincide with the diner's scheduled debt payment deadline. The immediate financial fallout would ensure not just the closure of the shop, but its foreclosure. As she spoke, her friends continued their loud, shallow chatter, covering the sound of the deliberate, cold sabotage that was already sending a death blow to Cassie's family business. The silence that followed Ruth's phone call was heavy, broken only by the clinking of keys in the hand of Cassie's father, David, the manager and heart of the shop. He stood at the counter, his face pale and etched with defeat, holding a handful of official documents that smelled faintly of cheap copier toner. Ruth's sabotage had worked perfectly. The bogus reports, compounded by the threatened legal action and the shop's already precarious debt, had given the bank and the city the final, undeniable reason to pull the plug. David placed the documents down slowly, his eyes meeting Cassie's only for a fleeting second of shared, crushing despair. He didn't need to speak. The truth was a physical weight in the air. The long fight was over. He turned, retrieved the dreaded placard from the dusty storage room, a bright, offensively crimson foreclosed sign, and with a shaking hand, he pushed open the front door. The sound of the sign being mounted above the faded Phoenix's family shop awning was the sound of a legacy ending. Cassie watched her father walk back in, the empty look in his eyes mirroring the hollow ache in her chest. Everything she had fought for, everything her family had sacrificed, was gone, erased by one callous act of spite. The diner, the only home she'd ever truly known, was now just a shell, a monument to their failure and Ruth's cold victory. The final, cruel flash of Ruth's camera was the last thing Branwell Kersey needed to see. The Mafia boss, a granite statue carved into a bespoke gray suit, slowly shifted his weight and rose from the booth, his towering presence dwarfing his 2 dark-suited men who immediately straightened behind him. There was no theatrical rage, only a dangerous, absolute stillness. His tattooed hand, powerful and precise, adjusted the cufflink on his crisp white shirt as his eyes locked onto the epicenter of the malice, Ruth's smug, triumphant face, frozen in a laugh of pure spite. Then, his gaze dropped to Cassie, hunched over in shame, her body language a testament to crushing defeat. The contrast was a verdict. It was not mere justice Branwell sought. It was the utter eradication of that kind of cruelty. Moving with silent, predatory grace, he walked directly toward the exit. As he passed Ruth's booth, her laughter died in her throat, momentarily unnerved by the man's sheer gravity. He didn't acknowledge her, didn't spare her a glance, yet his movement was calculated. In one swift, imperceptible motion, he reached into his jacket pocket and let a small, black object, a high-tech, dime-sized tracking device, slip from his fingers, clattering softly behind the booth's leather cushion. He didn't break stride, his eyes already fixed on the shattered figure of Cassie. He paused for only a fraction of a second, just long enough to drop his personalized business card onto the counter near her hand, a token of impossible hope and terrifying promise, before stepping out into the cold twilight, his men dissolving into the darkness behind him, the hunt already begun. The moment Branwell Kersey's sleek black car melted into the city traffic, his men, who hadn't exchanged a single word inside the diner, sprang into action. They were highly trained professionals. One secured the diner's local records, while the other was already feeding the tracker's signal into Branwell's centralized network. Within minutes, the scope of Ruth's power was exposed. Not legitimate wealth, but a house of cards built on her father's shadowy financial deals and excessive leverage. The operation began with surgical precision. Ruth, oblivious to the existential threat she had just provoked, was still preening over her selfie when the first, minor tremor hit. Stepping outside, she reached for her silver sedan, only to find the curb empty. Her custom luxury car was gone, legally and untraceably towed under a fabricated emergency maintenance order signed minutes ago by one of Branwell's many operatives in the city infrastructure. Confused and enraged, Ruth stormed back into the cafe, pulling out her platinum card to call a cab. She swiped it, declined. She tried another, declined. Every single one of her vast credit lines, thanks to Branwell's swift, targeted actions exploiting her father's compromised accounts, had been flagged and frozen. Her arrogant smile finally shattered, replaced by a look of bewildered panic. The foundation of her shallow power, instantaneous access to wealth, was dissolving, and she had no idea the silent, bearded man from the corner booth was behind the rapid, terrifying unraveling of her carefully constructed world. The frantic search for her driver and the desperate calls to her bank led Ruth and her now panicked entourage straight to the city plaza, only to be met by the unmistakable sight of Branwell Kersey. He stood amidst his men, his powerful frame a monolith against the backdrop of glass and steel towers. Ruth, tears of fury and frustration streaming, recognized him instantly as the silent man from the diner. She rushed forward, ready to unleash a torrent of entitled demands, but Branwell didn't wait. His voice, low and resonant, cut through the city noise like a guillotine. "Your credit lines are gone, Ms. Ruth. Your father's holding company is currently undergoing a full audit by agents who now possess every detail of his illicit offshore dealings." The shock paralyzed Ruth. "You don't understand," she stammered. "You can't touch my father." Branwell allowed a cold, humorless smirk to play on his lips. "I don't need to touch him. I needed to ensure that the ruin you engineered for a good, honest family is returned to you tenfold." He revealed a printed sheet, a summary of the complex legal and financial disaster he had unleashed, all traced back to her malicious report on Phoenix's family shop. The humiliation was complete. Ruth's power, built on corrupt privilege, had been instantly exposed and utterly destroyed by a greater, darker force. Her friends backed away, terrified. Ruth, utterly defeated, sank onto a cold marble bench, realizing with horrifying clarity that her celebration in front of Cassie had cost her everything. Days later, the shame and shock still numbed Cassie. She sat outside the foreclosed diner, unable to leave the family legacy she had lost, staring at the angry red sign above Phoenix's family shop. Suddenly, a long, dark motorcade pulled up. Out stepped Branwell Kersey, no longer a mysterious observer, but a force of nature. He walked directly to the window, effortlessly tearing down the foreclosed sign, shredding the paper in his fist. He approached Cassie, his gaze unwavering but softened slightly. He didn't offer comfort or apologies. He offered action. From his jacket, he produced a thick envelope and a single, heavy key. The debt has been nullified. The original foreclosure filing was exposed as fraudulent and has been voided, he stated, his voice a deep rumble. I now own the deed. And now you do. He handed her the key and the envelope, which contained the signed, paid-off deed and enough funds to secure her family's future, no strings attached. Cassie stared at the documents, her hands trembling. Why? She managed to whisper. Branwell looked at the scarred doorway, then back at her. Cruelty is common. Genuine, quiet integrity is a rare asset, he explained, folding his arms across his massive chest. It's a resource I choose to protect. Use this wisely, Cassie. Rebuild. The transaction was complete. A new life, built on the ashes of her humiliation, had been gifted by the man who punished injustice with absolute power. 6 weeks later, the smell of fresh paint and new appliances replaced the stale scent of sorrow in the resurrected diner. Cassie stood straight, wearing a new uniform, crisp, clean, and without a trace of blood or shame. The sign above the awning now reads simply, Phoenix'S, a symbol of the business rising from the ashes of foreclosure. Her family was inside, working joyfully, their energy restored. Cassie had undergone her own profound transformation. The timid, passive waitress was gone, replaced by a confident owner who had witnessed the extremes of both malice and power. She had her business back, her future secure, and her dignity restored, a gift purchased through absolute retribution. She knew the source of her security, Branwell Kersey. He occasionally visited, always sitting in the same dark booth, watching, observing, never demanding. On one particular afternoon, as Cassie tallied the day's profits, a figure unimaginable 6 weeks prior, she saw him rise. He caught her eye across the diner. He didn't speak a moral lesson, but simply gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, a silent confirmation of their understanding. Cassie met his gaze, her spine straight. She was no longer afraid of the world's cruelty because she had seen the swift, terrifying power that protected her kindness. Her new life was more than saved. It was guarded. She returned his nod, a quiet promise to honor the integrity that had earned her this second chance. Did you think the mean girl got away with it? You won't believe the ruthless revenge that wiped her entire family out. Tap the notification bell and subscribe now to join the few who see the real cost of cruelty. Drop a heart if you think Branwell is the hero we need.